This video is all about downloading attachments from a feature service in ArcGIS Online. We're going to see how we can download individual attachments and download multiple at once. So open up the download attachments.py script from the attachments folder. So far we have added and deleted attachments. Here we are going to download some of our attachments. Actually, we're going to download some and all of our attachments. The attachment manager has a download method, and we're going to head over to documentation for this download method and check it out. Here we have the download method for the attachment manager. It downloads attachment and returns its path on disk. And this download tool works as follows. If nothing is given, all attachments will be downloaded, and I've given an example here. I do not recommend using this download like this. There is a save path optional string that will allow you to say where to save those attachments at the very least. If a single OID and attachment ID are given, the single file will be downloaded. And you can also give a list of OID values, and all the attachment for those object IDs will also be saved. We'll take a look at the parameters we're going to use. We're going to use the OID parameter. In our first example, we're going to use the OID and a combination of the attachment ID. This will allow us to download a single identified attachment. The OID can be a list of object IDs, or it can be a string representing the object ID. And the attachment ID is also an optional string or integer. It is the ID of the attachment to download. There's a note here that this is only honored if return all is false. There is no return all parameter. And then we have the save path. This is the path to the folder where we're going to extract, download those attachments to. So let's head back to our Python script. Up top, we are importing our GIS class to enable us to access ArcGIS Online, and we're also using the standard Python library OS module just to help out with some file paths. We first access ArcGIS Online using our GIS class and supplying in our home string. We'll assign the GIS object to a variable called AGOL. We're going to use our GIS object and use the content manager get method and supply in our feature service item ID, which I'm going to paste in now. The get method will return an item object. We're going to use that item object and access the layers property, which is a list of feature layer objects representing the feature layers of the feature service. And we want to access the second feature layer object of that list returned, which is our park trails feature layer. We'll assign the feature layer object to a variable called FL. We want to access our attachments information, so we're going to use the attachment manager get list method and supply in OID1 to get information on any attachments that are in our park trails feature layer where the feature has an object ID of 1. We'll assign the calling of the get list to a variable called attachments, and we'll print attachments to screen. We expect this to be a list of dictionaries, and our object ID of 1 in our park trails has one single attachment left in there, as we deleted the other 2 in the previous video, and that is FDM trail _1. I'm going to run this script. We can see we were returned our list of dictionaries. There's one dictionary in there. The attachment has an ID of 1 and a name of FDM trail _1.jpg. And we want to download this attachment. So we're going to use the object ID along with the attachment ID. I'll comment out our example where we're accessing the attachment information, and I'll open up our second example where we're going to download an attachment. We call our feature layer object and we access the attachment manager through the attachment property, and we use the download method that we saw in the documentation. We know our feature has an OID of 1, so we'll set that to equal the integer 1. And it also has an attachment ID of 1. And now we need to set a save path, and that is going to go to our attachments folder. We'll assign a calling of the download method to a variable called status and print the status to screen. I'm going to run this script. I'm going to pop up the attachments folder. We can see our FDM trail 1 JPEG has been downloaded successfully, and if we take a look down in the Python interpreter window, we can see what has been returned from the download method. It is a list with a single file path in there representing a single attachment that was downloaded. This list and the paths inside the list can be useful if you want to rename those files upon downloading. I'm going to comment out our second example, and I'm going to start on our third example, which is where we download all attachments for every feature or a selection of features. The first one up is where we can use the download method and just supply in a save path. So here I'm setting the save path to be our download folder within our attachments folder. I've assigned the calling of the download method to a variable called status, and I'm going to print that status to screen. So because we have not supplied in any OID or attachment ID, we expect the download method to download every single attachment from our Park Trails feature layer. I'm going to run this script, and I'm going to open up the downloads folder so we can see how those attachments are downloaded. We can see that folders were created representing the object IDs of the features that had attachments. And if I click into each folder, there is a subfolder, and this is the attachment ID for each attachment. If I take a look at 6, we have attachment ID 8 and 9. So keep track of that in your head. Object ID of 6 had 8 and 9. If we take a look at what was printed to the interpreter window, we have our list of file paths. Now, if I just comment out our example there that we ran and go back up and open up where we access the attachment information, I'm going to put in ID of 6 and click run. And we can see that our object ID of 6 in our Park Trails feature layer has 2 attachments where the attachment ID is 8 and 9, as we see in our downloaded folders. For OID 6, we have a folder of attachment ID 8 and 9, and we can see that our attachments have successfully been downloaded. I'm going to delete these folders that we just downloaded, and I'm going to go back to script and we will run again. I'll comment out where we are printing the attachment information to screen. In our second example here, where we're downloading all, we're going to supply in a list of OIDs, so we only want to download attachments for OID 2 and 6. We'll also print the status to screen. So let's rerun the script. Our script is complete and we can see the list of attachments downloaded. And if I open up our download folder, we can see that OID of 2 and 6 have been extracted, and we can see the attachments for those features that have been extracted. Now, there's one last nugget here when we are downloading attachments that is not in the documentation. So we have our feature layer object, and we have our attachments property, which is an attachment manager. And so far we've been using download, but if I put an underscore and download underscore all, this is a little hidden function. It is very similar to the download method, but it does have different named parameters. The first is object IDs, which is similar to OID, and this can be a list or a single OID. I'll put in 2 and 6 once more. We then have a save folder instead of save path, and I will use the same save folder, which is our downloads folder. We can also set an attachment type. So we can set attachment types. It can be a single attachment type or multiple attachment types as a list or a string. So we're going to set in image/JPEG. Now, if I go down to the Python interpreter window and scroll up to where we printed out some information, here we can see the content type property, and this matches for image JPEG. Now, I'm not going to run this because it'll be the same output as we saw with the previous run. But just note, you can use this underscore download underscore all method and just extract by attachment type. I'm going to comment out our third example. And for the last example, I'm going to show you how to download attachments with a bit more control. Here I'm setting a root folder, and this is our downloads folder in our attachments folder. If I open up that folder now, we have some downloads in there. I'm going to delete those out so we have an empty download folder, just so we can see how this works. I'm going to create a feature set of our current feature layer, which is our park trails. So we're using the query method, and we're only interested in the trail name and the object ID. So for each feature that is returned in our feature set, we're going to call the getList method. The getList method will return a list of dictionaries representing each attachment per feature in our park trails. If that attachment list has an entry, then we'll print the trail name. I'm going to create a folder path using ospath.join. So this will be our root folder, which is our download folder, plus the trail name. If that folder path does not exist, create that folder. For each attachment in our attachments list, we will create an ID folder path. And once more, if that attachment ID folder path does not exist, we're going to make it inside the trail name folder. We'll create a variable called outFile that represents the file path for the downloaded attachment. Once more, we're using ospath.join, supplying in the ID folder and the attachment name. So if that outFile doesn't already exist, then download the attachment. So here we set the OID to be the object ID attribute for the feature. We set the attachment ID to be the attachment ID property, and our save folder is our ID folder. Our ID folder sits in our downloads folder that has a folder name the same as the trail name that has an ID folder from the attachment ID. So let me run this script and open up our download folder. We can see FDM trail has been created with an attachment ID of 1, and we can see the downloaded JPEG. We also have our loop trail that has 2 attachments with attachment IDs of 4 and 5. And we can see the others have also been created. If we take a look at our Python interpreter window, we printed the trail name for each feature that had an attachment, and we also printed the attachment names that were being downloaded. So you can see how we have had more control over what we were downloading and creating folder structures for those downloads to sit in. In the next video, we are going to use these downloads to update the attachments in our feature layer. Make sure to continue on to the next video in this series, and also make sure to subscribe. Take care.